Welcome to the Punting is Winning podcast. Just two fans talking all things Hawkeyes. Here are your hosts, JD and Keith.
Welcome back, Hawkeye fans, to Punting is Winning, episode number 24 now. Quite a milestone coming up on 25. I think that's kind of a big one for us. I didn't know if we were going to make it this far, or not got the listenership yet that we were hoping for, but still enjoying doing it. I like doing this.
Yeah, it'll come in time once people start kind of getting the idea of what we're doing, and I think word of mouth sometimes is the biggest thing.
Yeah, and we're out of season at this point, so people may not be as into it as they normally would be during the basketball and football seasons. So we'll start off. Let's talk a little bit about the question of the week last week. The question of the week last week was, what are your three go-to items for Hawkeye tailgating, or just tailgating in general? It doesn't necessarily have to be Hawkeye tailgating. This is a Hawkeye podcast. Hawkeye tailgating is kind of our theme. Our responses included hot dogs, burgers, a grill for the burgers and hot dogs, and loud music, or a loudspeaker, so to speak. Some people's beverage of choice, obviously, their adult beverages were on the list. I'm a little on the different side. What about you? What are your three must-haves?
Yeah, I kind of have to agree with a lot of the people that chimed in. I think, burgers and dogs, hot dogs, I think that's pretty simple and pretty easy and pretty standard throughout a lot of them. It depends on the time of the day too. I think a little bit about what time you're tailgating. So if you got 11 o'clock start, you may do breakfast things.
Right.
You may do eggs and sausage links and bacon, maybe even hash browns. But if you're doing later afternoon, you might do lunch. Maybe even somebody bring some Philly cheesesteak stuff and make Philly cheesesteaks. As long as you've got something to make food with, and you got a little music bumping just to keep things going, and letting the neighbors of your tailgate know what you like in music, that's fine. And just people, having people around you and having fun and enjoying the camaraderie of being a Hawkeye fan. That's basically the things I look for and enjoy. So how about you?
Yeah, we always had a big tailgate when we were up there. My three must-haves, a football. I like to play catch every now and then, although I'm getting older and the arm's not quite what it used to be, but still nice to have when we had some of the younger kids, when my youngest would go up, or we had one of the other guys tailgate and had his boy was there as well. They'd watch them play some football. That was fun to do. Obviously, the food. For me, one of my must-haves was always Tom's brownies. Love to have those. And smoked meats was always a good thing. Recently got into doing a little bit of smoking myself, as you know.
Yeah. How you liking it so far?
Yeah, I enjoy it. My wife likes the flavors. I've been experimenting with a few things. Just did some chicken breasts on there last night as well, and wasn't quite as fond of this rub that I used on it this time as I was the first time, but still really good.
Yeah, that's kind of the part of the fun, is finding out what mixes of spices and rubs that you will say you don't like, or you do like, or you really love, or it just, it's experimentation. Sometimes you mix a couple different ones together and it really comes out nice. I've done a lot of smoking in the last probably 5-6 years, and I've got my favorites. I've got things that I like to go with just beef only. I got things I like to go with just pork only. I've got a turkey rub that I use that's for poultry. It's like a poultry seasoning and a few other little odds and ends. It just depends on what you're smoking, kind of, and then the preparation of all that. To me, that's the kind of the fun. That's what makes it, really. The cooking part of it is, you just let the thing do its thing and let it go. There's not much to it. Just checking the temperature every once in a while, making sure you're not going to overdo it. But just the preparation to get it ready. What binder you're going to use. I like to leave my stuff a lot of times, like especially pork butt and brisket. I like to leave it. I doctor it up the night before, wrap it in cellophane, leave it in the refrigerator overnight, let those juices kind of acclimate with the rubs and pull it right into the meat. And
Sure.
and then in the morning I hit it again, just kind of redust it with the rub and put it on. And that's really, there's not a lot to it other than that. Now, turkey, on the other hand, I think you can't go wrong brining a turkey. I've tried it both ways. I think they were both all right. The better one, obviously, to me was the brining, because I wouldn't do it if it wasn't that much better. So brining a turkey is the way to go on that. So if you do a turkey down the road, there's commercial brines available out there, or you can make your own. There's internet recipes you can get that work really well. Brining is not that big a deal. It is important, but the actual recipe that you use it can be important to some people, but I don't know that it really makes that big of a deal. I think the rub actually that you put on after the brine, you've got everything dried off. That's to me, that's what it really makes it, is that, and knowing when to take it off, knowing what temperature to take it off at, and resting also is a big thing.
Yeah. Well, and the chips that you use, or the pellets that you use for your smoke flavor, I'm finding that what I did last night was more of a brown sugar bourbon rub on some chicken breasts, and I used some apple mixed with just a little bit of hickory, and I mean, it was good. Don't get me wrong, it was good. It wasn't quite as good as the first rub that I used the first time I did that. Now, I did a pork loin a week and a half ago, did the brown sugar bourbon glaze or rub on that as well, and did the apple only, and that turned out really well. So yeah, it's like I said, it's experimenting and trying to find what, and everybody has different tastes.
Right.
Obviously, I know you said that at one point the mesquite didn't quite, it had a little bit of a bitier
flavor.
taste, bitter flavor to it.
Yeah.
I personally like mesquite, so that might be more my I haven't tried that yet, but
you should
I will
pecan.
try that with some...
If you like mesquite, you like pecan too, because pecan's a little more mellow. Same kind of overall notes, flavor notes, but not as bitter to me. It just has a little more mellow flavor. And I would run pecan pretty much if I needed to. It wouldn't be a problem. I don't go out looking for pecan, but if it's like if I go to a store and I need to get chip or pellets and that's the only thing available, I won't shy away from it, and I'll use it and it'll be fine. But I tend to gravitate more toward apple, because I like to do, like you do, pork loin, chicken, and turkey a lot. And those are really good for apple smoke. But beef, I can't go wrong. You can't go wrong with hickory, I think, is probably the way to go. Hickory and cherry are two favorites, my two favorites way. Darker the redder the meat, the more it seems like the darker, the harder the wood you want to use. So that's just,
I plan on doing
really a rule to go by, but a rule of thumb to go by. But
I plan on doing maybe some ribeyes or something on there.
Yeah. Do a reverse sear them at the end.
Yep.
Yeah. Very good.
So anyway, let's enough about the smoking meats. Let's talk about a little bit about the Iowa offense smoking some Big Ten defenses this year. Talk a little bit about the weapons that they have coming back. It's well documented that can't get a whole lot worse than what it has been. So I anticipate with the new offensive coordinator, Cade being back to hopefully his old self, I can see it may not be a top 50 offense, but it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be. It just needs to be, I'd say top 70, top 75 would be enough with the defense that they've got. Would be enough to win 10, 11 games with the schedule they've got.
Yeah, no question. Yeah, no question. You get into that 70 percentile of 70, or the top 70-ish, and I don't think you're looking at 11-1, 10-2 at the worst. And that's
if you could get top 50.
Game.
If you get a top 50, then you're giving Ohio State a run for their money too.
Yeah,
in that game, probably still not beating them, but you're going to give them much more of a run for their money.
Exactly. You pair a top 50 offense with that top 10 defense, and good things are going to happen.
Defense.
Top 5, depending
defense.
on who you talk to. Yeah. I think good
So
things are going
let's
to happen.
put up the offensive depth chart post spring that I was able to find on the internet here.
Okay.
Perhaps.
Maybe.
Let me see if I can find it here.
I just kind of hoping that
This,
Tim Lester's offense is allowed to be Tim Lester's offense, if you know what I mean. I don't want to see Kirk interfere with that, with some of his philosophies about being very careful with the ball, even though last year we were probably one of the worst we'd been for turnovers. But yeah, got a good crop of quarterbacks in. I think Cade's going to probably be your number one going in, unless he gets hurt again. Let's hope he doesn't. If he does, then we've got an adequate backup in Brendan Sullivan, who has played in the Big Ten and has taken a lot of snaps. So he should have a little bit of an advantage over number 3 Marco Alines. And then we got Jackson Stratton that came in too. So there's your quarterback room. We can go through that here in a minute.
yeah, let me get this pulled up. Thought I had it ready to go, but
James Rezar is a freshman. He'll be coming in this fall. That he didn't go summer workouts or spring workouts. He came in the summer. So here we go.
all right.
There it is.
So again, this is what I pulled off the internet. I don't know if it is. I mean, seems a little off in some places to me, just because we're throwing in some guys that are newly brought in transfers that we're kind of assuming will be the backups. But it makes sense what they did. So
yeah, and this is a fluid situation too. It's going to change.
Yeah. And if you've ever watched a Kirk Ferentz team, you know that the depth chart really doesn't mean a whole lot at any point in time. So
it seems like it's kind of a requirement.
Yeah.
That he puts out and puts one says whatever, and we'll change it when we need to.
Yeah, absolutely. So where do you want to start? You want to start with the let's start with the running back situation. I think that's the most settled position.
It is.
Not necessarily from a 1, 2, 3 standpoint, but from a depth standpoint and a quality of player standpoint.
Yeah.
We list LeSean Williams, Caleb Johnson, and Kamari Moulton. That's not taking anything away from Terrell Washington Jr., who I think will split time at the running back position, but will also see some time in the slot as well.
And that's good. And I think that if he's allowed to run a lot of plays in the slot, there are a lot of things that Iowa can do and take advantage of him. And they can have him doing screens, wide receiver screens out of the slot. They could have him running end rounds. They could do like triple reverses, double reverses. They could do all kinds of different reverse things. He could even throw the ball out of the backfield. I'm not sure that we'd want to do that unless we're either way ahead or way behind. But yeah, he's a very very good guy to have back there because he's so he's utilitarian.
Versatile.
He can do a lot of things. Very versatile. Yeah.
Yeah. And then when you look at the 1 and 2, to me, I don't even really think that's 1 and 2. That's more of a 1A,
1B or 1A,
and 1A, 1AB. Yeah. And the guy that's not even listed on this that we haven't talked about is Jazz Patterson. And, he's had some time where he's gotten some starting time. He's just a little bit different of a running back between, LeSean and Caleb are both very similar in style. They're kind of power backs with some speed. Amari Moulton's more of a shiftier back, but he does have some power. Jazz Patterson is very much like, and I hate to compare him to anybody, but his running style is very similar to like an Akram Wadley was.
Yeah.
More of a not going to run you over type. More of a try to outmaneuver you. He can get to the outside. He's got more speed than the other guys, I think.
Be kind of interesting to see what kind of offseason these guys have had from a standpoint of lifting weights and conditioning, running, all the different drills that these guys would run to make themselves better and get themselves stronger and bigger. It's sometimes you can make a pretty big difference between your freshman and sophomore year as far as your body style, your body changing it, nutrition, that kind of thing. And if these guys come in bigger, better, stronger than they have been, that bodes well. This is one of the few positions on the offense that I say we're in pretty good shape on. And
Yeah.
I'm not unhappy at all with what we have sitting there in front. We even got a kid from right down the road here at Adel, Brevin Dahl. He's a freshman coming in, and he's got a lot of accolades. I'm not sure how much he's going to see the field. Maybe special teams, but
Yeah, and I want to talk about him maybe later. I think I had him more pegged as a special teams, kind of maybe as a return guy.
Okay.
So I think that's where he's going to get some play this year if he can, prove his mettle when it comes to not turning the ball over. I think he has a very good shot at being kind of like the kid from Dakota Dunes. Gosh, I can't remember his name now.
Yeah, my escaping me too.
Yeah. Shoot, it'll come to me before this is over. So, but yeah, and I've heard LaShawn is now out of the boot. He had a pretty bad ankle sprain in the spring, but he's just coming out of the boot, so he should be getting back to his old self. We know what we've got in Caleb Johnson. He's solid all the way around, solidly built. And again, Kamari Moulton showed me some things last year, showed me some things in the spring, and Terrell Washington, Jazz Patterson, they all bring something a little bit different in that backup role, and I could see all of them getting some time. So
you have all the guys you've talked about. LaShawn Williams is the only senior on the team from a running back standpoint. So, it was to me, it was shocking that they were able to retain this entire running back room through the off season. A lot of these schools lose players that, wouldn't necessarily get a chance to play a whole lot or didn't want to bide their time and wait until their opportunity came. Well, I don't know what these guys were being told, but they all stayed. And that's shocking to me. I thought there'd be at least one or two that would try to find greener pastures. But to have them stay, that tells me they have bought into the system, and they're excited about the Tim Lester hire and the opportunity, quite frankly.
Yeah, and listening to some of these guys talk, I know LaShawn was talking about the offense under Tim Lester and getting the ball out to the running backs in the passing game more, and I like that. You've seen a lot of teams do that, and you hear a lot of announcers talk about how that's just an extension of your running game. You do those little swing passes out to the flat, and it's essentially a run where you're not handing off. It's a little bit quicker of a play, and getting these guys out in space is exactly what we need them to do. So that's, to me, that's a good thing to hear, that's where the focus is, not necessarily that it's just straight handoffs or whatnot. It's getting the playmakers the ball where they can do something with it. So let's see, fullback, Hayden Large down to the number 2, Rusty Van Wetzingen up to the number 1. Eli Miller coming back off of the injury from last year. Again, I think that gives you some flexibility. Van Wetzingen might be more of your true fullback, whereas Hayden Large being the converted tight end is something where you can maybe flex him out, and he's got that pass catching ability.
Right.
By the way, that kid's name is Brandon Wager.
Brandon Wager
just hit me. But yeah, that's kind of what I see Brevin Dahl being, as kind of a Brandon Wager style. But Hayden Large being able to flex out on that. I don't know what we're going to get out of Eli Miller yet, just not knowing the extent of that injury and how close he is to coming back. The fact that he's listed as the number 3 is a positive sign, but then again, I don't know how many fullbacks are on the roster at this point.
Probably those 3.
And honestly, with Tim Lester's offense, how many fullbacks are going to be playing? It sounds like we're doing a little bit more 4 wide with the tight end, so that's going to pull your fullback out. It might be, I hate to say, a dying position for Iowa, because it's always been a staple for the Iowa offense to have that fullback in there. We've had some good ones in the past. We've had some fantastic fullbacks in the past.
Yep.
So I'd hate to see it go away, but it also does make sense that that's the one position that maybe it's a little more opportunity to overlook it, to put something else in where you can get another wide receiver in, or you can get a even a second running back that can flex out, or that's more of a pass catcher. That's maybe the Terrell Washington Jr. coming into that, and a two-back set with LaShawn Williams or Caleb Johnson, for example. So I don't have a whole lot to say about the fullback position. I think it's a solid position from what I've seen. Again, I don't think it's one that we're going to utilize as much this year as we have in the past.
Yeah, I agree. They're important, but I don't know if they're as important as they've been in the past with this offense as changed or is changing. Right. Yeah. I hope they get to play, and I hope they contribute. That's all. And there's not much you can say about the fullbacks. There'll be some goal to go type of things that maybe they'll bring them in, like a jumbo package, something like that. They'll bring them in for some blocking, but yeah, I don't see a lot of play opportunities for them.
Well, and a lot of the fullback position in Kirk Ferentz's offense has always been as a blocking back. Anyway, you give them you throw them a bone now and then with a pass in the flat, or a goal to go situation. You might give them a quick handoff that they might get in the end zone, might get up closer to the end zone, whatever the case may be. But yeah, I see that as a fading position in football in general. So, the fact that Iowa still has one is probably the exception, definitely exception, not the norm anymore in college football and in the pros. You don't see that very often. But let's move on let's talk about the quarterback situation.
Okay.
Cade is moving around from what I've heard, throwing the ball really well, getting a fairly decent grasp of the offense. From what the interview with Caleb Brown was, he said Cade looks like the old Cade that he remembers. So that's a good sign. Behind him, we have Brendan Sullivan penciled in as the number 2 at this point, which I think makes sense. He's got that Big Ten experience.
Mm-hmm.
Marco Linez is the number 3, and you've got James Reeser coming in as the 4.
Jackson
5,
Stratton's
maybe.
got to be in there somewhere.
Jackson Stratton is in there. Yeah, I mean, it's, hopefully you've got an opportunity where you're not going to the 4th or 5th quarterback.
Yeah.
But, stranger things have happened. I remember
that'd be a season off the rails for sure on that.
Yeah. Well, I think was it Kirk Ferentz's second year at Iowa? He went 4 or 5 quarterbacks deep just because he was trying to find somebody that could run the offense. But we had some injuries as well. I just remember we ended up playing 4 or 5 different quarterbacks that year. So hopefully we're not looking at a situation like that, because that's kind of a season derailer right there. But I think we know what we've got with Cade McNamara based on what we've seen. Key to him is staying healthy.
Yeah.
Brendan Sullivan, I've been impressed with looking at some of his highlights at Northwestern. They bring a little bit different, each of them. Brendan's more of a guy that you might trust a little bit more to scramble or use out of that jet sweeps, the read handoff reads, that kind of a quarterback. Not necessarily that he's not a passing quarterback, because his percentage is pretty decent, 62, 63% completion rate. So, a solid backup. And from all things I've heard, he's going to give him every opportunity to win the job, and I think that's the best way to go.
Oh, I agree 100%.
You can't anoint somebody a starter just based on the fact that he's a grad transfer or a senior.
Right. You shouldn't go in with a preconceived notion that one person's better than the other if you haven't had the chance to watch them both work and perform in practice, for sure. And then you've seen McNamara in games at Iowa and at Michigan, and you've seen Brendan Sullivan practice and play, well, at least play at Northwestern. So you can't really say going in, you shouldn't, like you said, you shouldn't anoint one over the other at this point. You should give them and say, hey, look, this is going to be an open competition. You guys go out there and play the best way you know how, and we'll decide who gets to be the starter. And I wouldn't be surprised if they decided to do a situation where they maybe alternate a little bit, have Cade out there like 70% of the time, and have Brendan come in on third down in shorts, or have him come in, run a wildcat type, well, not wildcat for them, but run a situation where it's going to be like a little more running style, where you just take off like a quarterback draw or something similar to that, but yet also let him throw. So you got to keep the defense honest.
Yeah, I was just say you don't want to handcuff yourself to a specific situation for each of those quarterbacks. I could see a situation where you say, Cade, you're the starter. You're probably going to get 75% of the snaps, but we're also going to get Brendan some series in here too. He might get 2 or 3 series a game. Mm-hmm. And if the offense, let's say the offense gets 10 series a game and Brendan gets 3, that's, 70% for Cade. And that's saying, you're not keeping it as predictable, because you don't want to say, well, it's third down and 9 and I need a quarterback that can scramble out, and I may trust Brendan more because of mobility or because of Cade's injury history. Then you're basically telling the defense, yeah, it's probably going to be a run, and they can key on that a little bit. Now, like you said, Brendan having the ability to pass and having a good passer completion record or completion percentage behind that is a plus. You throw Marco out there, and with what you've seen, you're probably guaranteeing that's a run, based on what you've seen. Now, again, like you said, guys step up, guys get better in the off season, and I'm certainly hoping that's the case with everybody on the team. But I'm especially hoping that that's the case with Marco. That I think he's got the talent.
Well, my biggest thing too is with Cade McNamara. I would really like to see a 100% healthy Cade McNamara play at Iowa. We haven't seen that. We barely even saw it at Michigan when they, because I'm not a Michigan fan. I don't watch Michigan when he was playing. So just the championship game when they destroyed Iowa. But I'd like to see the kid get an opportunity to play 100% healthy, or as close as 100% as he can be possibly. And just see what he's got. I mean, people sit back and go, "Oh, he didn't look very good last year for 4 games or 5 games." Yeah, he was still hurt. He couldn't move like he wanted to move. He couldn't plant like he wanted to plant. Maybe you've got to give the guy an opportunity when he's 100% healthy. Period. It's the end of the story. If you can't give the guy an opportunity, if he's 60% healthy, if he's 40% healthy, I'm not sure what he was last year for those 4 games. I wouldn't even say he was 50% healthy.
I would say
on that leg. He struggled, and it was easy to see that he struggled. And I don't think if he was 100% healthy that he would have struggled near as bad as he did. I think there might have been some struggle, but I think that's just a little shaking off some of the rust. That would have been the offense
itself too.
On the offense, and there was some offensive line play that was less than stellar. But let's give the kid a chance when he's 100% and see what he's got. I'd hate to pass judgment on somebody based on them not being healthy and playing 4 or 5 games. I don't think that's fair to him.
I've seen him 100%. I've seen him at 100% health, and I think that's the year they took Michigan 11-1. So, that's never easy to do. I mean, he beat Ohio State. Granted, Michigan probably has a edge on the talent pool that Iowa doesn't have, but it's not that far off. It's not like it's Iowa's a high school team and Michigan's a pro team difference. It's, probably the difference between South Dakota State and South Dakota. There's a talent level difference, but it's not huge. But South Dakota State does have the advantage in that. That's what I'm saying is there's a talent difference, and he went 11-1 with that. But that's not to say that he can't do the same here, in my opinion.
So obviously after Cade, we've got Brendan Sullivan. He played at Northwestern, and he's got a lot of snaps, and he's got a good throwing percentage. He's got the ability to move with the ball. He can throw on the run. I think he is a great backup if he ends up being the number 2. I don't think you're going to drop off a whole lot if he is playing. He brings a little bit different of a set to it, skill set, but I think we're fine with backup. Unfortunately, this year I think we do have a good backup. Last year,
Yeah,
there was a lot of questions, and when he came in, there
they
were
were
more
answered.
questions than he left than there was even starting. So, but then after him, you got Marco Lainez, who's had just a little bit of exposure in a bowl game and a blowout. Hadn't practiced a whole lot up to that point. A lot of infamiliarity or unfamiliar with the players. He just really didn't get a chance to practice much. So it looked like it. Then you've got James Reesar coming in as a true freshman. And then Jackson Stratton, we don't know anything about him other than he played sparingly at Utah State.
Colorado State.
So there you go. That's your quarterback room. Not much to it other than
after 1 and 2, I think there's definitely a bit of a drop off. But I thought Marco played fairly well in the spring as well. So I wasn't that impressed with him.
He did the best he could with what he had.
Let's move on to the tight ends. I think this is another stacked group, like the running backs room.
Yeah, good group.
Luke Lachey and Addison Estringa, the 1-2.
Mm-hmm.
Zach Ortworth would be in that mix. We did have one tight end that did transfer out, and then you throw in Johnny Pascuzzi's pulled his name out of the transfer portal.
Yeah.
So he's available. He has a little bit of experience behind him. I think we're set when it comes to the tight end. Tight end's always a staple at Iowa. It's tight end U. So I don't ever really worry about that position.
Yeah, and Lachey's the only senior in the tight end room also.
Right.
Estringa is a junior coming up. You got Andrew Lynch, who's not seen the field much. Ortworth is probably going to be a little bit more involved this year.
Mm-hmm.
You got some Pascuzzi is a junior. You'll see the field some. I think you got some good guys that are coming in. You had some redshirt freshmen, Grant Leeper and Jalen Thompson. Kyson Van Voigt is a sophomore. He probably won't see much of the field. He might. Good. There's probably 8 or 9 guys here that could at some point contribute to the team. And I'm not sure Gavin Hoffman he's a freshman, true freshman. He may see a redshirt year. But redshirts get a little bit of playing time too, and before they have to give up their redshirt. I don't know what it is. The 10% of the plays or
play up to 4 games, I think.
4 games. Okay, up to 4 games.
Yep.
So they may keep him just under that to keep an eligible year of eligibility for him. So
yeah. If he's good enough, you maybe you don't worry about the red shirt and you just play him. If it's we've seen guys that have come in as freshmen that could play, and if that's the case, then I say go for it. It's nice to have that extra year, but there's no guarantee in this day and age of college football that A, they're going to stick around, or B, that they're going to stick around for 4 years.
That's
they may go pro.
Right.
So, you saw Sam Laporta played as a freshman,
mm-hmm.
And played well. So there's nothing against having some of these new guys come in and stepping in and being able to pick up the offense quick and see the field. So, but that's another group that I am not concerned about as far as depth goes.
I agree. Your running backs and tight ends are solid. The quarterback to me this year is a little bit better than it's been lately. So my concerns, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on tight ends. We'll talk about them as the season goes on. But my 2 concerns are offensive line and wide receiver, and we'll talk about those here in a minute. But tight ends and running backs and quarterbacks. It seems like a decent skill set of guys. They're young. There's only one senior on the offensive line or on the running back in the backfield, and there's only one tight end as a senior, and we have one quarterback as a senior. So we're still young in some of those places, and yet they're still solid. That tells you right there that there's been good recruiting there, and there's good development of players there to have as many as you do and have it be a solid room with just the one senior in each group. So,
Right.
yeah, kudos to Iowa on that one.
Well, you hit on what I consider the biggest question mark going into the season for me is the offensive line. We're not going to spend a ton of time on it, like individual positions. Just talk about the line as a whole. Starters appear to be, Richmond, Ellsbury, Logan Jones, Connor Colby, and Jennings Dunker. Obviously, we won't talk about he who shall not be named that spurred us for Alabama again, but he would have been a nice addition to have in there. But
he's not on the roster.
Honestly, at this point, I don't even know that I would have said he would have been a nice addition because I don't know that he really wanted to work that hard. But that's beside the point. When you look at that 5 offensive linemen that are listed as the number ones on this list, 4 seniors and a junior.
That's the part that strikes me, is that it's this veteran group. There's no more excuses this year for being as bad as they've been. There needs to be some accountability here. There's no more go-arounds. You can't say, well, I'll be better next year. You're going to have to be better this year.
Well, you got 3 guys on that, on those seniors that have an extra year of eligibility. It's just a redshirt senior. I think they have that, still have that COVID year. Their last group to have a COVID year, I believe. So they could be coming back. Like Mason Richmond, I know, has made comment that he's, this is his last year. But I think a lot of the guys that came back from last year said the same thing at the beginning of the year. You don't think about it until you have to think about it. So this is the year that these guys really need to make that leap. And it could be a situation where it was the offensive scheme and the offensive play calling that put them in bad positions. I don't know. I don't know if that's the case. There's talent there. We've seen it. Those guys are big. They're strong. There's no reason why, and I think we talked about it in the past. We've touched on the fact that I believe from what I saw, they were a better gap blocking line than they were a zone blocking line. Definitely that way were last year. So if they switch the style up a little bit less inside-outside zone and go more to that straight-up gap blocking, pulling guards, kind of like what Wisconsin has done over the last few years prior to, well, it would have been, what was his name?
Paul.
Last head coach, Paul Christ.
Yeah.
When he was there, they kind of switched and they were more of the gap blocking style. A little bit bigger. You could get away with the gap blocking with the less agile guys. I think the zone guys, you got to have a really agile line. So, this might be their calling if that's the case. And this is the season that they need to take that step because the schedule is very manageable.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping, like you said, fingers crossed that this is an eye-opening season for them. They can keep the quarterback upright.
One of the things that struck me from the spring was that when Tim Lester was hired and they started their spring workouts, he was allowed to just basically run offense through the skill position players. And Kirk spent most of his time, from the reports I heard, and a lot of people will back this up, and he spent a good majority of his day during practice with the offensive line.
Mm-hmm.
And that tells me that he's concerned enough about the offensive line to spend his personal time down there with them, working with them, to try to figure out what little details they could do that they weren't doing to help them improve and make a big difference for this coming season. And that struck me, that Kirk would just spend most of his time down there at the offensive line.
It doesn't surprise me, but yeah, it's eye-opening to see it. And I hope that's the case. I hope that he's down there to kind of touch up on the finer points of things that they are missing out on. The timing sequences, the steps, this is what you do. You don't have to think about it. And I think that's part of the reason why I mentioned it before, Logan Jones, his first year at center, I always thought the timing was just a slight bit off. Like his snap was just a little slow, and the offensive line was moving before he could get the snap to the quarterback. So the timing was always thrown off from that aspect. And I think that I saw that better last year. I saw it better, I think, when was it Tyler Ellsbury that was moved over to center when Jones was out. Seemed to work. Like the snap count was, and the snap was a little bit more crisp and a little bit more on time. But then I did see Logan Jones, his timing got better when he came back. So that's kind of a key point, is to make sure that if you're going to do zone blocking like Kirk wants to do, you have got to be precise in your timing, and you've got to be acting, not thinking. You got to be, you don't want to be reacting to a situation. You want to be dictating a situation. And I think that's where that disconnect has been, is they've been too reactive to it and not as dictative to it. And that might be the reason why Kirk spent more time with them, to get him more comfortable with that. I sure hope that's the case. And I sure hope this is a group that takes a huge step forward going into this year.
I noticed something too up there, that Cade Borud transfer from, was it North Dakota? Or North Dakota
or South
State?
Dakota, one of the
One of those two is
yeah.
listed as second center. I don't even know, did he even practice with the team in spring? I think he transferred after.
I think he transferred after spring practice. Yeah.
So, I mean,
penciling him as the number 2 is kind of a bold move.
Yeah, it's just kind of, okay. Are we?
Because I think you could, if you had to go to number 2, it's probably going to be Tyler Ellsbury, and you're going to push Joe Stevens into the left guard.
I agree with that. That's what, and maybe this Cade Borud will earn his way into it.
Mm-hmm.
But anointing him number 2 center without ever having practiced in Iowa with an Iowa uniform on, or even if it's a practice uniform, is a little bit, hey, whatever. Okay.
Yeah. I
guess you've seen enough film to know that he's good. If you didn't want him, he wouldn't have transferred.
Right. Yeah.
So,
and I think when you look at the offensive line, that's outside of him, the rest of the twos have a little bit of experience with Nick Young and Bo Stevens. I don't remember Jack Gotzler getting much in there, and Leighton Jones being a redshirt freshman. But we'll have to see. Hopefully, we don't have to go too deep on that position. That's kind of, like I said, that's a position group that I am the most concerned about. A lot of people probably say wide receiver, but I'm most concerned about the offensive line.
Well, yeah, I think they're 1A and 1A.
Yeah, or 1A and 1B. Yeah.
I think they're pretty much equal as far as concerned.
Yeah, let's move on to the wide receiver group.
Mm-hmm.
I think the starters, Caleb Brown, Seth Anderson. We go 3 deep. Probably Hayden Weechin is your number 3 guy. Push him into the slot with Caleb and Seth being on the outside. Jarrett Bowie has turned heads in the spring. I didn't see them target him much in the spring practice that we went to, but he does have, based on what I did see, he definitely has some athletic ability.
Yeah.
And then they've got Jacob Gill, the transfer from Northwestern, penciled in as the number 3. Again, that's kind of a bold thing when you haven't seen somebody, but he does have the Big Ten experience.
Exactly.
So, that's gonna those types of things there are gonna work themselves out in the wash when it comes to fall camp.
100%.
So
they will.
But we talk about the wide receivers. It's not that there's a lack of wide receivers; it's just a lack of experience. And there's talent there, because we've seen it. Caleb Brown has talent. Hayden Weechin's super fast, and he's got talent. Seth Anderson, talented individual. It's just now, this is kind of where I said that the offensive line was more of a concern to me, because the offensive line can't hold their blocks long enough for these guys to get open. Then it doesn't really matter how good or how bad the wide receivers are. So
yeah, that you were saying about the quantity over quality, or going at the post-spring roster. I know you've got the post-spring 2 deeps here, but the post-spring roster has 16 Iowa has 16 wide receivers on their post-spring roster. If you look up the roster right now, there's 16 wide receivers. So it's not a lack of people. It's a lack of experience, like you said. A lot of these kids are redshirt freshmen. I mean, they just keep go down the list. Sophomores. Where's the seniors?
Weegen's the only senior.
Weegen is the only senior. We talked about this earlier, about groups of skill sets. The offensive line, there's a bunch of seniors. Hey, that's the only place that is senior laden. Everything else is like one senior out of each group.
Mm-hmm.
So, we're still young in some of these skill positions. And that's either going to bode well for the future, but not for this year, or being young isn't that bad of a thing to have going into this year too. You can look at it two different ways. Being young it's an experience situation where you don't have a lot of experience, and that's going to hurt you a little bit in big games. You might get a drop that you wouldn't normally get with an older receiver. A younger guy might drop a ball in a key situation, but you'll have to look at the offense in 2 years and say, wow, we're going to have a ton of seniors on the off if they stay. Of course, that's not a given anymore. But I like the room for the most part. There certainly could be better players too that we didn't get in the transfer portal. I think there were some guys that went through Iowa and then ended up transferring to somewhere else, or we're looking at Iowa as a possible transfer location, place to be. Didn't stay. That would have helped. Some older veteran players come to mind, but we got to roll with what we have.
Yeah, and here's the thing that I would say about that: changing offensive coordinators, coming in with a fairly new system. I almost would rather have guys that hadn't been in the old system that long, because there's less bad habits to break, perhaps. So having that younger group might not be as bad of a situation. Again, it comes from the lack of experience. And I don't think it comes from a lack of talent when it comes to these guys. Obviously, they can do things that neither one of us could ever do.
And we're not comparing ourselves to them either.
No. But I'm saying is, it's not for a lack of talent, especially with the top 4, 5, 6 guys. Probably I throw Terrell Washington Jr. into that mix, because working him in that slot, to me, he's just like the hybrid. He's he can play a lot more because of his versatility, and that or he could sit on the bench a lot more because of his versatility. That's the plus and the minus of that. But I think he's going to play a major factor in that wide receiver room with this new offense. And I think that, Caleb Brown will take a step forward. I think we saw that in the second half of the year. Seth Anderson, to me, just kind of disappeared, but I think he was hurt. I really do think he was hurt part of most of that year.
A little,
And just couldn't.
Yeah, I'm excited just for basically the development, to watch the development of these guys over the course of the year. And hopefully they are will be given opportunity to make plays and to show what they've got. By throwing the ball to them, where in the last year or two, they didn't get the ball thrown to them that much. And it just felt like you run out on pass routes, you're more of a decoy than anything else. And it gets kind of hard on a person to continue to do that game in, game out with very little chance of the ball ever being thrown to you.
Yeah.
So to have a new coordinator, a new offensive scheme, at least somewhat new, with tweaks, that the opportunities are going to be there. I think the opportunities will present themselves to these guys. They just have to make sure that they take advantage of the opportunities that are presented to them. Make a catch over your shoulder that normally most people wouldn't make. Just basically show out for everybody and let's see what you have and put your best foot forward. And I think then at that point we'll be fine. But they have to make plays. They have to be solid. You can't have 15-yard drops when they're wide open. That tends to deflate an offensive drive really quickly.
Yeah.
And at that point, then when you have to think about that you a drop pass on a wide open catch where you could have gotten at least 10 or 12 more yards to run out of bounds, and you drop the ball, you have to perform. You have to, even though you're young, you still have to catch the ball. That's what you're out there to do, and you need to do that.
Yeah. And I think this is the most wide open position group of the bunch.
Yep.
This is a situation where, you've got a couple of guys who have some experience that transferred in, Caleb Brown, Seth Anderson. But if they don't produce, there's guys behind them that are, probably just as talented or close to the same amount of talent that I don't think they're going to be afraid to put them in there and say, hey, catch the ball. You're good.
Caden Weegan, Alec Wick, Jacob Gill coming in the transfer. I think those are guys that are solid backups that could see a lot of the field this year. Dayton Howard, people talking about him, redshirt freshman. He might see some action this year too. So I wouldn't be surprised to see some of these younger guys get the really younger guys, the redshirt freshmen that are on the roster to see some playing time. It wouldn't surprise me.
Well, and another guy that we didn't mention was Alex Moda.
Alex Moda, redshirt freshman, absolutely.
Yeah, there's another guy that could really squeeze himself into that mix as well. I think. Yeah. So
there's
it'll be interesting to see.
Here. Yeah, I think there's more opportunity for younger players here in this group than there is in a lot of the other groups.
I agree completely. I completely agree. So that covers the offense. I see that to me, I feel it's going to be a better offense than it was last year. There's not a whole lot of ways you can go down. I think you can go down one. I think you were 131st out of 132 or 132 out of 133, something like that.
I think you'd see a fan base in revolt at that point.
Yeah.
I think Iowa's fan base would absolutely just go crazy. There would be riots in the streets of Iowa City. You can't continue to be this poor on offense. If you make changes like you've made and they continue to be this poor, then something's not right in the water at Iowa.
So let me ask you this then.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say the offense improves and they're 125th, which is still not good, but the team still goes 10-2.
I get the same bad feeling bad taste in my mouth that I had at the end of this season.
Mm-hmm.
That
it could have been better.
We left a lot out on the table. I mean, I don't care that we lost to Michigan, and I don't care that we lost to Penn State, because I think they're better teams. I just didn't like the way we lost to those teams.
Yeah.
And Tennessee.
Getting shut out.
Exactly. Not even having a pulse when it comes to the offense. They just was out there. There wasn't even CPR available to them at that point. They didn't do anything on offense.
Yeah.
And that's why I felt like, even if we, like you said, if we were 125th this year, if we go out and lose to Ohio State, 30-15 or 14, I'll feel better than getting beat like we would have last year, 40-0.
Yeah.
So, I still won't like it, but at least I'll see, hey, there's improvement there. Hey, we're better than we were last year, even if it's not a whole lot, which I suspect that it'll be a lot more than what 125th. I just can't see.
I'm just throwing that out.
I know you're throwing that out there, but I just tell you, it would be the same bad taste in my mouth that I had from the year before. 10-2 is not a bad season. Don't get me wrong.
No.
In fact, I've got them going to a 10-2. But I think they're going to be better on offense, and I think they have to be better. I think the offense is it has to be.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is going to be a better season than we anticipate from an offensive standpoint, just because I think it feels like there's been an injection of new life into it. And it's more of an excitement thing maybe for me. Again, I mentioned it a couple weeks ago that I do like the defensive battles too. I don't care to watch the Big 12 style of 56-52. That to me is not. That's just as boring as 3-0, in my opinion.
I've been thinking about something since you mentioned it. That I guess I don't know if I thought about this longer, maybe I'd come up with a better answer. But how would you? It's like you said. How would you feel if your offense was drastically better? Let's say they're in the 70s. Let's say they're even in the 60s, and you still end up 10-2, the same as you had last year. Obviously, you'd feel
better about it.
You'd feel better about it, but you wouldn't. You'd still be 10-2. So I guess you would feel. I guess having a 10-2 season with no offense and having a 10-2 season where the offense is actually pretty decent, even though it's the same result, it's still 10-2. You have to feel 1,000% better than this year than you did last year, even though it's the same result.
Yeah. I think that takes a little bit of the national attention off of how bad you've been.
Oh yeah.
You know, that to me has been the biggest complaint that I would have had as the offense being bad, is just the fact that it became a laughing stock in the national media. Yeah. And, you know, people look at, oh, they're terrible in offense. You know what? They still finished 10-3 or 10-2 in the regular season, and, you know, 10-3 after the championship game. A lot of teams would sell their soul to win 10 games. Iowa State's never done it.
Right.
They have a better offense than we have. They have a pretty quality defense. They've never won 10 games. You know, people are going to say, well, but the schedule. You still got to play the teams. You know, You still got to have a defense that holds that other team to not scoring. And, you know, if they're in the 60s or 70s or 80s in total offense, then you still got to stop them. You know, and that's you know, but that's neither here nor there. You know, I like you said, 10-2 with a 60s offense in the 60s and a defense in the top 5. You feel better about it, but you also feel like probably a little more let down in the sense that.
Well, I think too the national, like you said, the national mentality of that Iowa had went from 130 to in the mid 60s for offense. And I think that takes the pressure off. And I think at that point, then you are more apt to get the benefit of the doubt when it comes to playoff seeding. If you're 10-2 and you've got an opportunity to make the playoffs, but you have a 130th ranked offense, you know, are people going to look at you the same way as if you got a 60th ranked offense and you still have the same record?
Yeah.
No, people are going to look at you a whole lot different. They're going to say, yeah, Iowa, good defense, good offense, you know, really good defense, decent offense. You know, they can run, they can get some points, they can score. Whereas last year's like, yeah, good defense, but that's it.
Think about this, and then we'll end it on that, and we'll kind of move on. But think about this: Iowa was 10-2 at the end of the year. Where were they ranked at 10-2?
Like 23, 24.
Yeah. How many 10-2 teams in Power 5 conference would be ranked that low? That's a group of 5 ranking at 10-2. So not only do you get the benefit of the doubt from the national media that comes in that form of the pollsters as well. You know, that 10-2 probably becomes, you know, goes from 21-22 to 13 or 14.
Or 10th.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. If you lose to Penn State, you know, instead of being 31-0, if you lose to Penn State 31-24, and then you let's say you beat Minnesota, well, let's just say for the sake of it, you screwed up and you did lose to Minnesota, which we didn't. But then you go in and you play Michigan in the championship game, and let's say that game, instead of being 28-0, it's 28-24.
There's the benefit of the doubt, and you're looking better. Yeah,
absolutely. People are looking at you a whole lot different. You might even have got a transfer this year that looked at Iowa and said, "You got no offense. I'm not even going to think about you."
Well, and the other thing is, you know, not to interrupt you, but that 31-0 or whatever it was at Penn State probably isn't near as bad as that. You know, because the offense turned it over a lot, didn't give them any field position. So, you know, you're looking probably more at a 21-14, 21-17 game, maybe.
Sure.
You know, they're not going to score 31 points.
No, probably not.
If the offense does anything. And that same goes for Michigan. You know, when we weren't giving them field position, I think that game was basically a 12-0 game at best.
And another aspect of the situation too is if Iowa wouldn't have gone 3-and-out, 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 and then turn over the ball 4 or 5 times a game, then your defense wouldn't be so tired. They probably wouldn't have given up a touchdown that they gave one up, just because they were tired of being on the field for 70 plays a game instead of 55 or 45 or whatever it ends up being. But you put so much pressure on other parts of your team, your defense, like consistently going 3-and-out and punting. You just can't underestimate how much that affects other parts of the team. So when you have an offense that can actually sustain a drive and run 8, 9, 10 plays, you're giving your defense, one, they're not going to be defending as many plays. Two, they're going to have a chance to rest a little bit and get some hydration. And it's just so much better.
Yeah.
There's a lot of aspects of the game. Yeah. Anyway, we could go on about this for hours. Yeah. I don't want to.
So moving on, let's wrap up the offense on that, and let's talk about a question of the week for next week.
You go ahead on this one.
I want to know what your first live experience was with Iowa athletics. What was your first live event seeing Iowa play? It could be basketball, football, whatever sport. I know what mine was, and not one that I will ever forget, because it was the year I graduated, and it was my first football game, but we'll save that for next week. But I want to know what the listeners, what your first exposure was to a live Iowa sporting event.
Yeah.
So let us know what that is.
Leave it in the comments, please.
Yeah, leave it in the comments there. We'll post it on our Facebook page as well. Always remember to catch us out on Facebook, on Twitter, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Now on YouTube. Obviously, if you're watching us on YouTube. We also have some short snippets posted on TikTok, so you can catch a little bit of a preview of what the show is going to be about if you're kind of on the fence about whether you want to sit and listen to two guys ramble for an hour. But yeah, make sure you catch us on those mediums, and we'll
make sure you subscribe.
Yeah, make sure you subscribe.
It doesn't cost you anything to subscribe, and click the little bell. It'll let you know anytime that there's a new video posted. And put a like down if you like what you're listening to. It only helps us down the line, and we can get get exposed to more people.
Yeah, we're not making money off of this. We're not trying to monetize this by any means. We just want to get this out to as many Hawkeye fans as possible, and that enjoy listening to people talk about Iowa sports. If there's other podcasts that you think we should listen to, put those in the comments too. Yeah. I would love listening to Hawkeye podcasts. Mm-hmm. So I have a few of them on my list already as it is. So
yeah, it's good to get other opinions.
Yeah, with that, we'll wrap it up for the week. And as always, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.